This is Launching Your Daughter podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now, here is today's episode. Episode 34. Well, welcome everybody. My guest today is Natalie DeFrey Foster, a licensed associate marriage and family therapist at Integrative Art Therapy in Phoenix, Arizona. Natalie is a trained clinical art therapist and specializes in working with adolescents, adults, and families. And I'm excited to speak with her today and how art therapy can be beneficial in working with teen girls and their parents. Welcome, Natalie.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Well, I would love if you can tell the audience just a little more about you and what it is to be an art therapist. Explain what that is a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The way I kind of came into this field was a very personal story, actually. I was beginning as an art history major in undergraduate and always kind of an artist, but didn't want to be a professional artist. But I just really wanted to use art to help people because I'd been using it to help myself over the years. Kind of traced it back, and I figured that I had made art for every kind of tough time that I'd been through in my life and wasn't really sure what that meant yet. But when my brother actually went through heroin rehab, my family came into it with family art therapy, and it was just an extremely powerful experience. We had never seen anything work with us in that way, so it really opened up the communication on our end, and he actually used art therapy on an individual basis throughout his time in the program and had mentioned to me, this is something that really changed me, that really helped me a lot. And so to help him tell his story and develop himself as a person, it kind of just clicked for me, oh my gosh, maybe I should be an art therapist. So the program I went through was a marriage and family therapy program. With that platform for licensing, you can use the art therapy in many other ways, and it's a lot easier to kind of break into the field that way. So I did get the benefit of learning a lot about children, teens, families, couples, and the way that the family operates in and out of the community, because I think that's an extremely important piece for health and wellness within the family.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. Well, so I'm curious then, explain to us a little more, because again, you do have such a personal experience with using art. How does that become more powerful than just kind of, I guess, the talk therapy? What makes art therapy different?
Well, you never know what's going to show up when you come to the canvas or the page or the ball of clay or whatever it is that you're working with. For me, over the years, painting has really been special. And, anytime I run up against a frustration or an issue that I can't seem to figure it out quite on my own, I will just come to a blank canvas and I don't even know it's about to flow out, And so for me on that personal level, it's an extremely explorative and insightful process that allows the images to kind of take over and help me to see what's going on underneath the surface. So there's always answers tucked into the art. And so when you're working with a person, they may not be as comfortable or familiar with the art, but it always has richer information and more depth and breadth of sort of what's really going on for them than they could maybe convey if they were coming in and asked a couple of questions as far as talk therapy goes. So
I love that. And I totally understand where you're coming from too, because again, I work mostly with teen girls and women who struggle with anxiety, and they're very much up in their head. And with art therapy and or even expressive arts, it's getting them out of their head. And as you're saying, it's really allowing yourself to go within and just letting whatever image or information or words or whatever bubble up from within the body and not just stay stuck up in your head.
Yeah. And I like what you said about that, because it can also be about helping them to physically connect to their body.
Yeah.
So, the art can actually be a kinetic kind of a sense experience, so to speak, that they are using their arm to really move the pastel across the page in a very sensory way, or they're pounding clay or breaking objects or whatever it is that they're doing, ripping something apart. So it can be very grounding in that way, even just on a more neurological basis. So
absolutely. And I know for some of our listeners, they may not quite understand, what do you mean by grounding? What does that mean?
Grounding, it's an interesting concept, but it's the best way I can put it is just to become closer to your body become closer to the earth and to sort of, we all carry very intense energy and emotional thought and anxious thoughts. And to ground just means to become more present in the moment in no matter what you're doing, because we tend to take ourselves away from the moment with the thoughts of the past and the future and our worries and whatnot. And grounding is just about getting here in the now. So
beautifully defined. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love it. So explain just a little more. How does this modality, again, the art therapy, how can it work well, whether it's with the teen girls and or their parents? What are some of the things art therapy can do that really can be helpful to them, whether, let's say, they're having a lot of conflicts at home or their communication is struggling? How does art therapy help with those sort of things?
Yeah. So, well, it's rapid, yet it's subtle. I think that, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and the focus is on the art, really. And I think that teens think that's cool a lot of the times.
Yeah.
It's not as much like a traditional experience as far as therapy goes. They come in and there's something else to focus on instead of, a professional and an adult who they've never met staring at them.
Uh-huh.
So, it kind of gives them something else so that it's not such an intense experience as far as, what's wrong with me or why am I here? That tends to help to open up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I've had teens that were nonverbal at times, and not because they couldn't speak, but because they didn't want to speak to someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so the art just gives you really another mode of communicating. So when we're looking at whatever they're working on, we're concretizing it, because you can't evade what's happening in the room because it's being put down on the page in front of you. So whether it be the weaknesses, if they're afraid or they're in pain, they have their own self-doubts, they're locked in the past via some trauma, they can put it down on the page, and that way we can see it and experience it as apart from them, which I think tends to help as well.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing it as, because as adolescents, we all tend to absorb everything, and it's all about us at that point. So to be able to see it as separate from them, I think it helps with the teens to kind of process through and work apart from their pain and their trauma and their fears or doubts. And same thing with strengths. If you're celebrating something, you're clarifying it, you're concretizing it, you're putting it out there, you're making it real in the room with us. So you can't really hide, yet you still get to decide on some levels what you're communicating. Mm-hmm. So there's an ability to control the process as well, which I think is helpful with teens because oftentimes they feel so out of control. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like I said, some kids will have an innate interest, and even if they don't, there's no art experience necessary. So it just becomes something that's a little bit more interesting and fun, I would say, than your typical therapy experience. And so when we're looking at family in art therapy, that's a bit of a different experience. You can choose what unit of treatment you're working with. So if you're working with a family, you want to stick with the family and get as many family members in as you can for every session. That's obviously the most helpful way to really make the therapy effective. If you're working with a teen, primarily, say the teen has issues with self-esteem, you might want to bring the parents in at times. You might want to be bringing even the siblings in at times, depending on what's going on at home. The art helps in a huge way because it's a huge tool for assessment. We have a couple of different kind of more structured assessments, like the family art assessment, the kinetic family drawing, are two to name specifically, that help you to kind of really see for yourself as the therapist in a very short amount of time what kind of roles, patterns, hierarchies, dynamics, and alliances there are existing in the families, to see how the family operates in relationship to each other and to community. And also, you get to see basically where people sort of pair up together and where people are putting themselves on the page. So say they're drawing themselves in the context of their family. What if, a kid draws himself as a real big stick figure and draws dad over in the corner as a tiny little stick figure, so that kind of gives you the information of what's going on structurally in the family to help you to adjust those roles.
Yeah, and I love how you talked, earlier working with if you're just working with the teenager and or if you're working with the parents and the teens, the whole family unit, it's another way that visually everybody can kind of see how they are perceiving things and a different way to actually be seen and to be heard versus just the traditional talk therapy. So especially for teenagers, there's a lot of that is going on inside of them. There's so many changes, and sometimes, they don't feel seen and they don't feel heard or they feel misunderstood. And so to be able to express that through the means of art and creation can really help her parents see her differently or better understand her in another way. And then as you're saying too, with the art therapy regarding family piece of it, you kind of see like, okay, this is how this child is seeing it, or this is maybe their child is kind of doing something, or there's something going on with the family dynamics that needs to be shifted or changed a little bit so that parents are a little more present within that system.
Yes. And the nonverbal approach really opens up the communications. I've seen a mother and daughter who would never speak with each other that were able to communicate solely through the art. And so, that's something that is extremely powerful in terms of opening up the communication and really letting everyone have their voice. And you get to see who can't have their voice. If there's someone that's sitting with their pen or their marker or whatever you're using, if they're really off to the side, they're not really expressing themselves in the context, and the other three are taking over, then that's something to be said, because, a well-balanced family is a family where everyone has a chance to share their voice and everyone has, a piece of the limelight and they get to all be heard and seen. So,
yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Art and the expressions of the different modalities, it can be extremely powerful for all family members to start to understand kind of what is going on or the things that are not typically said out loud. And it's like, oh, okay, that's how that's been working.
Yeah. And to be able to kind of just explore it from that realm, you can use the art and change it. So, if the family is working with a piece, and something's not working quite in the most healthy way, with the therapist's help, because they understand what they're seeing, the right questions being asked, the right interactions with the art, the right engagement, then they could choose to shift something or alter it. And then you have it concretized. It's there in front of you. You get to see, hey, this is what we were doing. Here's how we're going to change it. And now we have something that flows more, that works for everybody.
Yeah. And I love that, because as you're saying, that the art, it can be changeable, just like life. We choose over and over certain behaviors that we do, or those thoughts that may get stuck in our head. And it's like, it's all changeable. If you want it to be different, this is one way to be able to see that and go, oh, I can do that different.
It's a two-way street as well. It's not just that they're reflecting their inner process. When people alter their art and therapy in a creative and, more health improving way, they're actually altering their inner self.
Yeah.
So then working on the art is them truly altering their patterns and their habits and their ways. So
that's so cool. Love it.
Yeah, it's very fun. I love my job. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, I'm imagining, I know a lot of times when I have guests on, I talk about, when it comes to therapy, some of the common concerns you have. And I imagine, because this is what I've heard in the past within my own clients, of not wanting to do art therapy because there's a fear of being graded, being judged, shamed, things like that. Do you hear that as well?
All the time.
Okay.
All the time. And, it's great grist for the mill, to be honest, because it brings the insecurity into the room. So if you're working with a teen, for instance, it's a way to open their creativity in a very non-judgmental atmosphere. But there will be self-judgment. It's a good place to explore it because they're in a safe place. It's therapy. And truly it gives them the opportunity to explore who they are. And it's not just about, feeling like, oh, I'm not an artist and I can't draw. And it's actually, we all have imperfections. We all have our doubts about ourselves and our identity or self-worth. But if you can be seen and heard and know that you matter, no matter what, in that moment, so some things that kind of trigger that are things like a self-portrait. You imagine just what it's like for teens in general at that kind of fragile place in their lives where they're sort of forming their identities and figuring out who they are. That self-portrait could bring up a lot. That's definitely one of the things that I hear a lot is, But I just remind everyone, this isn't art class.
Yes.
This is an art therapy experience where you are free to be and do whatever you want. And I tell them, I've seen it all.
Yeah.
You know, so it's an interesting experience.
Natalie, I'm curious, you've talked so much about all the ways that art therapy can be helpful for not only teens, but also their parents or the family as a whole. Are there any other benefits that come through by using art? Whether again, it's helping reduce the anxiety, it's helping with communication, it's helping with, confidence level. What are some of the other ways that it can benefit the teens and their parents?
Well, I think that, teens are under so much pressure a lot of times to just care about certain things, to look, act, dress a certain way. That can get in the way of an authentic connection between the teens and their families in general. And oftentimes we feel so isolated. And, that's another reason why examining what your role in community is, because we weren't meant to be really, living in our own separate houses. As humans, we initially had it in a very communal based way where we all were together. So, and art is as old as, and not quite as old as humans, but we've been using it for a very, very long time. It's not just a distraction, it's powerful and raw. But, like I said, the art becomes the subject. And so there's something in the room with us now to help really accomplish the goal of sort of restructuring what's going on in the family. Because there's always, families are working machines in a way, and if you get one little tiny pebble thrown in the cog, sometimes that can throw it off. And it can be very subtle shifts, but those are the shifts that are needed in order to kind of get the machine back on the right track and the, just kind of the real experience of connection happening in the room.
Yeah.
So, I think in general, I think that kids need safety, they need that structure. And even if they're fighting tooth and nail to say they need independence, they want to know who's the parent and who's the child. So I think that helping them to kind of readjust, it's different every time. A lot of times I hear parents, am I needed in therapy? Do I need to be here? Or sometimes they bring their kid in and they just kind of want their kid to get the therapy, and oftentimes it's more beneficial to have more than just the child in the room. So I think that that's one of the, common ways it can help is to sort of open up the dialogue from, oh, well, my kid's depressed and my kid has this and that. Well, actually, the whole family could use a little bit of help to kind of express themselves and to bring something new to the table in a totally non-judgmental way. And I think that doesn't happen very often in the real world. It's something that therapy provides, and the art can really just help to elucidate that without having much pressure and much, it kind of does the talking.
Yeah, and I like what you were saying too about sometimes parents, they don't necessarily know what to do. It's like I'm bringing my child into therapy because of depression or anxiety, and so I don't know if I'm really needed. And as you were saying earlier, even if your teenager it's all about autonomy at that age, they still need them. They still want that involvement. They want to know that they are being seen, they're being heard, and that they're being held. And so parents, it's like your jobs aren't truly done yet. And yes, your input in therapy is vitally important. And if something isn't working, it's not about shaming the parents. It's not about saying, you don't know what you're doing. It's like a lot of times it's just little bit modifications of certain ways or things that are being communicated or how behaviors are being managed. It's just minor things that can be shifted. And as you said, that art can really be, because it's outside of the person, everybody can look at that, reflect on it, and then yes, the inner work is still changing, but it's like, okay, it's the whole system. It's, as you're saying, the community piece of it, that everybody needs to be involved in some way to have that structure for the kid, for the child.
Yeah, and truly art is fun. I think that's another part. We talk about how intense and how raw this can be and how very powerful, but it truly can be a very fun experience for the family too. I think you see that oftentimes where it's like, wow, that was fun. Once they're done with their opening up and they're sharing, and maybe there have been some tears, maybe there's been some emotion, but there's also this sense of, hey, that was really cool. What did we just do? Or that. We should do more of that.
Yeah, that is nice. Because again, it's allowing, because parents, I think sometimes as adults, right, we forget it's okay to play. And it's like, oh, we got to be serious all the time. It's like, no, 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 no. It is truly okay to allow yourself to play and be, allow that creativity come up as well. And so this is a great way to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm curious, I'd like to kind of shift a little bit and talk, what are some maybe books or pieces of advice that you may give either teen girls or maybe even their parents or just families in general, either during sessions or after or in between the sessions? What are some of the things that you typically recommend?
Well, truly, I have recommended many books in my time, and I honestly think that experience teaches more than we could imagine. So my advice would be just really for the teen to allow themselves to be themselves, no matter how hard it is, and to explore themselves using some sort of creativity. They don't have to be an artist, but if they are, then that's great. They can, I'd encourage them to participate in homework assignments and making art of their own in between sessions, and maybe keeping an art journal. I think that that's something that really teens can, appreciate. A journal, a space for themselves, no matter where they are, to be able to create something, writing or drawing or whatever it may be. That would be my best piece of advice, would just be for them to really take the time in between sessions to explore some creative aspect of themselves. Yeah, it doesn't have to look like art. It can maybe some kids really into soccer, but looking at soccer more than, just a sport that they feel the pressure of, but what does it really do for you? What do you love about soccer? What is it that connects you to yourself about soccer? So helping them to kind of find themselves through the creative acts that they put out into the world.
Oh, that's lovely. I really like that idea of having like an art journal or anything, whether it's truly doing art or doing poetry or writing music, whatever it may be. Again, it's staying connected to themselves and allowing them to be their true selves.
Yeah.
Just to let everybody know, the sounds you may hear in the background are some dogs trying to say, hey, what's going on? So that's what that noise is.
They're very worried about mom right now.
Yes, they are.
We're going to need some art family therapy after this.
Well, so Natalie, I'm curious, how can people find you, get a hold of you? What's your website? That sort of information. So if people want to find out more, or if they're in Phoenix, Arizona, what ways can they get a hold of you?
Our website is www.integrativearttherapy.net, and that's a great way to access, what it is that we're doing. My supervisor and the owner and operator of the company started it about 3 years ago, and she's really on an amazing mission to blend not just art therapy, but also use of nature, going out into the community and using the kind of natural parks we have here, and walking with clients in nature, and even incorporating the natural objects into art pieces back in the office. So she's doing something really amazing, but www.integrativearttherapy.net is our website. She's sort of building this eco art therapy. So she's very into, using recycled materials and like I said, natural objects, but kind of how can we be conscious about the world that we live in and the ecosystem and the environment, and also, use it to help each other heal, not just the earth, but also ourselves. So
lovely.
That's really cool. And really, our website is the best way to connect to us on that level. We have a blog on the website, and myself and my supervisor, Lainey Smith, contribute to the blog on a regular basis. So there's always really interesting articles there about, art and nature and grounding and, getting the support that you need in relationships and also with family. So it's an interesting website. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, for that information, and I'll definitely put it on the show notes. So if you are driving, don't worry about it. I'll have the link that has everything on the show notes there. So I just want to say thank you again, Natalie, for coming on today and explaining a little more like what art therapy just is in general, but how that being an experiential model can really be beneficial for teenagers, their parents, and just the inner and the system work that goes on with all of that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Just a reminder, go out to launchingyourdaughter.com and sign up for my newsletter regarding some upcoming teen girls group starting in 2017 and some ideas I'm having about some groups for moms. Thank you for listening to Launching Your Daughter with Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist. For more information or to stay up to date, go to launchingyourdaughter.com. You can sign up for my email list or join my Facebook group. Thank you.